Not only were Evan's thoughts and feelings huddled together in a state of confusion, but his confidence and trepidation had also become acquainted. Chapter 8. Evan's epiphany had arrived. As they continued walking for what now seemed as though the best part of 20 garage lengths must have passed, Evan considered suggesting that maybe they had taken a wrong turning and were in somebody else's garage. Almost there, Fate told him, and then suggested that he may want to shield his eyes from the brightness. Evan wondered what his new acquaintance was talking about, and then realised that the darkness was changing and it was becoming rapidly lighter. Then suddenly the darkness was gone and the light was upon them. Bright, sharp light hurt in the back of Evan's eyes, flashing, painful bursts of brightness which had made him want to turn around and dash back into the darkness. The darkness, though, had already made good its own escape from its natural adversity, the brightness. Whilst he stood there with his eyes closed, waiting for the pain in his eyes to subside and adjust to the unexpected brilliance, Evan began wondering how they had managed to walk for such a long time inside his garage, which had now been renovated into a whole host of different smells, sounds, and textures. His senses became aware of the extreme changes which had occurred around him. Gone was the stink of leaked oil on the garage floor and dirty old rags which had been used to mop it up with. In its place was the smell of grass and trees and other aromas which really had no right to be loitering in the confines of a person's garage. Gone was the sound of pessimism shouting after them with his promises of failure and his threats of revenge, replaced by the sounds of birds chirping and singing songs full of light-hearted hopefulness. In the distance, Emma thought he could make out the constant splatter of water as it collided and splashed over something considerable, maybe large stones, which lay in its course. After a further moment or two of blinking and squinting, he managed to open his eyes in order to discover the source of the new odours. Once again, the logic of his mind and the contrast and acceptance of his eyes were at a contradiction with one another, as Evan now realised that he and Fate were outside in a faraway field. His conversation was taken aback with the startling transformation from their previous environment to this pastoral setting, and it remained quietly reserved, allowing Evan to confirm with his eyes what his other senses had already suggested to him. As he stood there with the sun warming his face, his senses and his mind began to acclimatise to his new surroundings, and he wondered how it was now somehow daylight when only a few minutes ago it had been evening. Definitely evening. He wondered how much more bizarre his weekend could possibly turn out to be, and whether his sanity was up for the task of dealing with the extreme events which seemed intent on testing his resolve to more and more extreme levels. He thought about Fate's statement which he had made in the garage regarding the accuracy of time, and he tried to form an understanding of the time discrepancy which had occurred. It helped a little. He had, however, no accurate comprehension of the time distortion that had actually taken place. It was weird enough how Fate had manipulated time by 10 or 15 minutes back in his garage, but the difference between night and day that Fate had somehow manufactured was outside the laws of physics and beyond the realms of Evan's comprehension. For a moment he found himself wondering if it was earlier that day, Saturday, or the beginning of the following day, Sunday. Not only were Evan's thoughts and feelings huddled together in a state of confusion, but his confidence and trepidation had also become acquainted, and were talking about how he may be out of his depth with these unnatural occurrences. He was considering turning around and going back to the normality of his garage. Clarity intervened and pointed out that he had no idea how to find his way home and that he needed fate to guide him through the light and back into the darkness of his garage. Fate pushed Evan's apprehension to one side when he reminded him about how he had promised him that things would be different. A fresh day for a fresh start, he pointed out, trying to put Evan at ease. Evan felt as though fate was drawing his attention away from the bizarre and toward the obvious, and yet Evan had no real comprehension of the extent of the bizarreness, which was far removed from the obvious. He wanted to ask Fate how he had managed to unnaturally manipulate so many aspects of the laws of science and the natural order of nature. But he knew that no amount of physics lessons and environmental teachings would ever be enough to allow him to grasp the scientific abnormalities which were occurring around him. He realized that there was no point in trying to understand things which he freely admitted were beyond his comprehension, for now he resigned himself to just accepting that things were out of the ordinary and to just wait for the next anomaly to present itself rather than throwing a handful of questions at fate. Besides, his apprehension and confusion were beginning to be overshadowed by the realization of the certainty that this new acquaintance of his was indeed an entity named Fate, rather than a mortal, and that this entity was without doubt about to take him on a life-changing journey. After thinking for a moment about what needed to be asked, he tried to ask Fate just the one question regarding his surroundings. "How has everything changed?" he asked. "Where's my garage?" he added, his enthusiasm getting the better of him. "And finally, where are we now, and what are we doing here?" "Everything has changed because we are in a different place." "And a different time," added Evan, inserting an obvious observation of his own into the conversation. "Quite right," agreed Fate. "Your garage and your previous life are just back there, through the light and into the darkness." "Would you like me to take you back?" he asked. All previous thoughts of returning to the familiar comfort of his garage and his normal life had had a change of heart. "No, thank you. This is astonishing," he told Fate. Fate continued answering Evan's questions. "We are on the edge of your mortal world, which we call Mortalitania, heading towards the outskirts of the place where entities reside, Personificadia." Fate could tell that Evan's epiphany had arrived, so he gave it a moment to permeate the mortal's mind before he continued. Evan now knew that Fate was genuine and that their journey was not some flight of fancy. It was real, it was plausible, and it was about to begin. "As I said earlier, we are going on a journey along the highways of life, to show you and teach you that there is more than one route available through life for those who care to seek it, and for those who dare to tread a different path. I assume you are willing to change, or we would not be standing here in this field." "Yes, of course, I am willing to change. Come on, let's get moving on this highways of life that you mentioned, on this journey that you told me about. What are you waiting for?" he enthused, almost trying to lead the way. "Wait, there is someone I want you to meet," Fate told him, thinking that Evan's excitement was a lot stronger than he had anticipated. "It's this way, but you do need to calm down." They made their way down the field to the edge of the river and walked along its side until they came across 5 large stones which bridged the river from their side to the other. "I know where we are," Evan informed Fate, looking down at the stepping stones which spanned the river. It was a long time ago, when I was a youngster. I used to play here." Fate appeared uninterested in Evan's reminiscing. I could cross those stones with my eyes closed when I was a boy. Seeing that Fate was still not really impressed with his reminiscence of his boyhood acrobatic skills, he thought he would try to make Fate smile by adding a bit of colour to his rendition. I was hopping at the time, balancing a glass of water on my head, and I never spilled a drop. Using the back of his hand, Fate slapped Evan on the shoulder and told him to shh. Sorry, I was just having some fun, said Evan, defending his behaviour, and then wondering if his new acquaintance was going to be this serious all the time. I know, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with fun. We can have some fun later. But for now, we have got some business to attend to. Over there, look. Evan looked across the river in the direction that Fate was pointing. Recognise him? Asked Fate. Should I? We should move a little closer and then perhaps you may recognise him, suggested Fate. So they set off in order to be adjacent to the huge tree which the youngster was sitting beneath. When they had walked a little nearer, Fate raised his hand to signal that they should stop. That's close enough for now. We don't want to scare him away, Fate warned. Then pointing at the boy, Fate again asked, Recognise him? I recognise the tree. Have another look, a good look, urged Fate. Evan tried his best to make out the features of Woody, but from their side of the river, and seeing the boy from a three-quarter profile, he was not at the best vantage point to recognise him. So they moved a little closer. I kind of recognise him, Evan acknowledged, while wondering why they should be bothering with the young boy. Look to yourself for the answer, Fate suggested. Look to yourself for recognition. The answer lies within. Look to yourself for the answer. What's he on about? Thought Evan. And then something began pulling his mind towards some distant memory, some obscure realisation, while the protective part of his mind was pulling him in the opposite direction into a safe place where sanity and reason live. Evan's eyes and logic were at loggerheads with one another as the boy's identity began to emerge into Evan's understanding. Is it? Evan looked at Fate. Is it? Then he looked across the river at the boy. Is it? He repeated, just the same two words, and each time the third word, which kept trying to follow in the footsteps of its predecessors, seemed to trip on one of his vocal cords and fall back down into his voice box, determined to remain unspoken. Until finally, recognition conquered disbelief, and Evan informed Fate that it is me, isn't it? I can't believe it, but it is me. I know it is, because that's my tree. It's called Old Ligneous. And that's me, sitting there, all young and vibrant, much younger, so young and innocent. Look, it's me as a young boy. It's me, isn't it? It was indeed a young time separation of Evan, the man. We're going to talk to him, aren't we? Evan all but told Fate, without considering how the boy would react to being approached by what was to him a stranger, claiming to be an older version of him in later life. Yes, but you can't just go over there without first working out what you're going to say to him in order to convince him as to your identity or our intentions. What are we going to say to him? Hello, I'm you. How do you expect that he will react to you claiming to be an older time separation of him? No, I just thought. No, you didn't think, interrupted Fate, and that's one of the things we need to work on. It appears as though you've forgotten how it felt when you first met me, and then pessimism. Now stand there and listen to me whilst I make it clear what I expect of you." Evan stood there, trying to concentrate on what Fate was telling him, but his interest was paying attention elsewhere, trying to see what was going on across the river. "What did I just say to you?" inquired Fate, after giving Evan a finger jab on his arm. "We need to work on my concentration?" guessed Evan. "Yes, we do. Now, listen to me attentively whilst I tell you what needs to happen. It is you a short while before you go to some old derelict mill to break in, for today is the day that you commit your first crime. It is the day that your life changes forever, and it is entirely up to you in which direction that change takes you and young Evan over there." Evan was beginning to realise how immense the consequences of today's meetings were going to be. "This is it," he thought. "This is the chance I never had, the helping hand at long last. Who needs a father?" He was not sure whether to cry or to hug Fate, but decided that neither would be the appropriate behaviour, considering how long he had known him. He composed himself and began listening to Fate much more single-mindedly.